Under this arrangement, the technology flows both ways, but it's basically about wireless tech for use at the edge. You know, it was a huge surprise just going on the reaction of Nokia shares, but it's Nvidia moving into yet another new segment. What's your reaction to it, please?
So it is. I think we have seen the transition towards a virtualized radio access network be a little bit slower than what we would like. With this partnership, Nokia is basically promising to rewrite its stack, update its hardware stack, update its software stack, optimize on NVIDIA software libraries and on NVIDIA hardware. So I think it's very significant.
Why does Nvidia need to make a $1 billion equity investment in Nokia and own 3% of it in order to do this?
I think that what we've seen in the past, whenever you ask a company to rewrite their software stack, it is costly. In fact, Amazon did something similar, a little bit more under the radar, when they started shipping their ARM CPU. What they did is they would enable software developers through funding to optimize their code for ARM, to migrate their code from x86 to ARM. In essence, what NVIDIA is asking Nokia to do is to optimize their code for whatever is already virtualized from x86 to ARM, but also to move from a physical RAN appliances to a virtual RAN.
What's extraordinary, Vlad, here is if you take the bigger picture, this is NVIDIA time and time again basically making investments for people to ensure that Nvidia technology is integral across every industry group. If you just go through Nokia when you think of telecoms, but they did deals across Lucid, across Uber. We're thinking about robo-taxis. We're thinking not just telecommunications, think about the future of software when we think about what they've been doing with Palantir. Vlad, is there any other wide open space for Nvidia to get into?
I think you're absolutely right. This is NVIDIA utilizing its cash stockpile in a very smart way by entering another market. The mobile infrastructure market itself is only 35 billion. So I think Jensen understands that this is not going to be the holy grail. This is one of the many investments. I think that you see something very similar that I think will become more prominent in storage. I think that NVIDIA has a lot more room to grow in networking. I think you see it growing a lot more in consumer PC, right? Because that's one of the things it wants to do with Intel. I think you end up seeing it probably in the robot revolution in the future. They also said they want to be in cars. So I think that we can see that Jensen's strategy is just maximize your presence and specifically get your programming environment, the CUDA environment, to be ubiquitous.
Just tell us how ubiquitous it already is, Vlad, because I think so many of us make the quick assumption that it's all about hardware and semiconductors, but this is a full tech stack, and the fact that they're so ingrained in terms of software as well, it's almost become the de facto king across every other big tech company.
Yes. In fact, I myself underestimated it a little bit because one of the things we know is a NVIDIA advantage was the NVLink. And we are starting to see more challengers in the networking domain. But the reality is the networking is not as sticky as software. Software is extremely sticky. The thing is they have made such a rich suite of tools, in essence, a programming language and so many tools that make it easier for different skill sets of programmers to develop. I think that's what's so impressive about the NVIDIA software portfolio and the fact that you can use it for many optimized functions. I think that's what's very interesting. In essence, Jensen is asking his army of developers, I want you to help this industry and this industry and this industry and this industry. That's, I think, what's the most impressive.
Vlad, the biggest disclosure that Jensen Huang made was the $500 billion figure of revenues that they say will come from just Blackwell Rubin, specifically over 5 fiscal quarters, excluding China. When that number went up on the screen on stage, a lot of people reacted. How far ahead is that figure than the model that you had for the data center business that NVIDIA is doing?
I knew you were going to ask me this, so I did, of course, that was what we were auto watching yesterday. It's about 100 billion higher. So this creates about 100 billion opportunity. I think it's very significant particularly if we end up seeing the Blackwell deal with China, because that means that we then have more than 100 billion of upside. I think when I think about the 100 billion of upside that Jensen is showing us, I think of it as a backlog, an order pipeline. There are a few concerns that I have along the way in terms of that materializing in my forecast. So I am going to start exploring baking it in, but some of the things that I am concerned about are physical infrastructure availability and supply chain or readiness and power availability in the data center. I would say that these are the three things that I am most concerned about. Is all of the components that we need there in the supply chain? Specifically, is the physical infrastructure ready for data centers? Because there's very long lead times on some physical infrastructure. And then finally, it's the power.
Vlad, can I jump in very briefly here? Because when you think about the supply chain, you think about the other components that are needed within data centers. SK Hynix says its full 2026 chip slate is sold out.
Exactly. So the thing is, with SK Hynix, they are in the Blackwell, but the Rubin is done with Samsung. So I think that there's some smart hedging of bets there from a memory perspective, but there's so many other aspects. There's packaging material. And again, NVIDIA is being very careful with how to balance the packaging material supply chain. But NVIDIA has only been able to control the semiconductor part of the supply chain. I'm worried about some fundamental materials like precious metals used in the building of the servers and the electrical equipment.